Your grandparents may not have had Disneyland or Six Flags amusement park, but that doesn't mean they didn't have fun. Just north of Wheeling Island were 3 small islands on the river. The largest one was the southernmost one, and it is now, it's just below what is now the Pike Island Dam. The park was called by the locals Coney Island, after an amusement park in Cincinnati, not the one in New York. The one in Cincinnati was on the river, it was very popular, and around here it was famous. I don't think the New York Coney Island one had as big a reputation as the one in Cincinnati. It opened in May of 1905. And at that time, it featured attractions called Wheeling to the North Pole, Streets of Asia, the Arctic Slide, a roller coaster, a circle swing, Damascus Theater, and a village, a Ferris wheel, roller skating, dancing, and vaudeville acts. That's a lot. So it would be enough to keep you busy if you went to the island. The park was owned by the Wheeling Amusement Company. Now, I did find some references that said it was owned by Uneeda Brewery, but I can't prove one way or the other. It looks most likely Wheeling Amusement Company. They even had an office in the Board of Trade building, so I believe them. And their original outlay was $100,000, which is $2.7 million today. The manager was H.W. Rogers. There was no entry fee, and the steamer ride cost 5 cents. A park. Beats Disneyland, doesn't it? They planned to make the park family friendly, with no alcohol sold on the island, a wall surrounding it, and guardsmen at each of the 4 gates. The picnic grounds would be free to churches and unions and other organizations, and only proper behavior would be permitted. Wintertime entertainment would be bowling and roller skating. One of the engineers who laid out the World's Fair buildings in St. Louis was in charge of planning and designing the buildings and landscape. All buildings were to be fireproofed and well lighted. They didn't say anything about it drowning. All trees on the island were to be removed, and construction began in February of 1905. The stadium would hold 2,500 people for operas, circuses, and vaudeville acts. It was estimated that 25,000 people would visit the city in 1906 for the Saengerfest, the Saengerfest. To get there, one either took the wheeling traction or panhandle traction cars or a boat. There was also a barge ferry, and a pontoon bridge was quickly added, and a connecting bridge was planned. 2 railroads planned to construct special lines and 2 stations, one on each side of the river. On the Ohio side was the Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Wabash line, and for West Virginia, the rail was the Panhandle Traction Company. Down the center of the 19-acre island was a paved road, 40 feet wide, and the length of the island, and it was called the Court of Honor, with 9 branches leading off of it. In the center of the amusement section was a 95-foot tower with a ball on top, and the stars and the stripes on top of that. The tower was lit with 20,000 electric lights that would illuminate the Court of Honor, and from the very top of the tower, red lights shone. And you can imagine looking out at the river and seeing this island with this 95-foot tower and red lights on top. That alone would be an attraction. Plans for the north end of the island include the stadium, theater, and an apple orchard to be used as a picnic area. The bathing beach was at the north end, and bathers were able to swim at night as well, as the area was well lit. I can't imagine The beach area was designed for 500 people. Can you imagine 500 people swimming in the Ohio River? It's beyond me. The Egyptian, and this is before our water plant, and yuck. The Egyptian attraction would feature a troupe of players who were successfully at the London Exposition, The village would have camels, donkeys, and elephants. The wedding ceremonies prevalent in Egypt were demonstrated and explained. Reportedly, there were hundreds of Turks and Moors in the village. Now, can you imagine Turks and Moors on the streets of Wheeling? What they must have thought of Wheeling and vice versa. The Wheeling to the North Pole exhibit, and this puzzles me, showed explorers in a spaceship traveling to the pole. The circle swing was a 95-foot tower with cars on each arm, which held up to 12 people. And it swang across above the island. And also there was an exhibit called Across the Rockies. But this spaceship to the North Pole, I think you got on this ride and you looked through glass at scenes of things the explorers would do. Now, I don't know if they did them while they were flying through space or even what they were doing, but it was one of the best attractions. Regular concerts at the Court of Honor were performed by the Boston Ladies Military Band, acquired for the whole summer at great expense. One of the other free attractions would be the Slide for Life by Miss Anita, who will slide from the top of the electric tower to the ground below and then will perform a trapeze act at the top of the tower. The steamer Ruth, which carries 300 passengers, would run from 11 a.m. to closing at 11 p.m. On opening day, the Ruth had to turn away people as 6,000 turned up to view the amusement park. That's a lot of people. And you think the population of Wheeling then was a lot different than it is now, so 6,000 is a real handful. Not as much as Billy Sunday or Buffalo Bill, though. In the summer of, did I say that the Panhandle Traction Company put on extra cars? No, I didn't tell you that. In the summer of 1906, one of the best attended shows on Coney Island was the Herald Square Opera Company, who performed several different comic operas. Advertising for the performance was a slogan on all of the streetcars, which specified, "Not yet, but soon." A banner hung, that was their motto, you know, their advertising hook. A banner hung from the skyscraper on the Schmolbach building. The whole thing is just amazing to me. A flood in the March of 1907 reached a height of 45 feet. 1907, so the park has only been open a year, and did considerable damage to the park. 2 of the buildings overturned and the theater was swept away. Even though the main buildings were anchored with heavy iron, many were destroyed. They were rebuilt and the park was scheduled to reopen in July of 1907. But the damage was more extensive than first thought, and the work crew was unable to keep to the schedule. Large piles of drift were seen everywhere, and the watermark for the flood depth was high on the tower. By June of that year, it was announced that the park would not open until 1908. Adding to the misery was the sale of the popular boat Avalon, which had taken thousands to the island. Coney Island was abandoned in 1913 after the last building was carried away by yet another flood. Dredging of the island by the Ohio River Sand and Gravel Corporation began in in the 50s, I believe. So that's, now you know as much as I do about the island.